All right. Hey YouTube, I'm Lucky, and in today's video, I'm going to be ranking all of the hand cannons in Destiny 2 according to their effectiveness and their meta position in PvP. I'm excited to bring this to you. It took me several hours to put together, but I'm very confident in this list and how I'm going to be ranking these things. I have made one previously, but obviously a lot has changed in the game now. Bungie has mixed up the sandbox quite a bit, so before I dive into this hand cannon tier list, I want to cover a lot of changes that have happened from the last hand cannon tier list I made to this one right now. So the first thing is, of course, airborne effectiveness is now a thing that Bungie is pushing heavily. So if you want to have, really good inner accuracy, you have to pair with it, a certain exotic armor piece, Iklas grip on the legendaries. But overall, what we found with airborne effectiveness in the current sandbox and the current meta is that you really just don't want to jump in the air a whole lot. Bungie has sort of pushed a lot of people away from that playstyle, and previously, when ranking hand cannons, we would obviously rank the legendary hand cannons significantly higher than a lot of their exotic counterparts because, for example, Ace of Spades has such good perks, but you can't jump in the air, and without that aerial movement, it kind of takes away from the lethality of hand cannons. Hand cannons are especially good for peak shooting and aerial movement and their aerial accuracy, but take that away because of airborne effectiveness, and that changes and shifts how they get ranked significantly. The second thing we're going to talk about is that stability equals less flinch. So the higher the stability you have on that hand cannon, the less you're going to be flinching with that. So you're going to want to have a hand cannon with high stability, or at least you would favor hand cannons with higher stability because no one wants to flinch, right? When you're shooting that hand cannon, you want the bullet to go exactly where you're aiming. You don't want to be flinching all over like crazy. There are other things that factor into this, like resilience. So, of course, you could spec into that. If you have a hand cannon you like or a hand cannon that has a really good roll, you, of course, could spec into just really high resilience and not really stress the stability too much. But we will be factoring in stability when we rank these hand cannons throughout all of this. And then moving on to the next part of this, we're going to rank these hand cannons based on, of course, the best archetypes. Right now, the 140s are the strongest archetype, the 120s following those, and then, of course, we have the 180s, which are probably the weakest archetype in PvP currently. And then we'll go into perks. The best perks that we see right now inside PvP in general, we've got Slide Shot, which, of course, gives a boost to stability, which is something that we are going to be talking about quite a bit here because of the changes to the sandbox. We've got Rangefinder. Elemental Capacitor can give a boost to stability or handling. You've got the Payload perks, which give an excellent boost to range and make people flinch like crazy. You've got Eye of the Storm, which is a really good dueling perk. You have Opening Shot, which is just an all-around really good perk for hand cannons. And then we'll move on to the hand cannons that will be ranked in the S tier will be some of the best hand cannons with really good base stats. So there's like a few hand cannons that just stand out significantly more than other hand cannons in the game. I'll give you, for example, Palindrome just has unbelievably good base stats. And because of that, the Palindrome is just such a sought after hand cannon and one that I'm sure you probably like using if you do like using hand cannons, which you probably do. That's why you're watching this video, right? So, spoiler alert, Palindrome gets the S tier treatment. And then we'll move on to a variety of other different categories because there's so much difference between each hand cannon, so much nuance in here. So, let's go ahead and start from the beginning where we're going to rank our first one. We've got the Annual Skate, and I'm going to go over the god roll of each and every one of these hand cannons, of course. The Annual Skate and Energy 140. We're going to put in the A tier. Its base stats are not as crazy as some of the others out there. It does get some really good rolls. We got Slide Shot, Time Payload, Time Payload is crazy for that like double flinch effect. If you haven't been using that in PvP, definitely recommend that. Even just go test it out and see how crazy it is. You flinch once and then you flinch again, do the Time Payload. It does increase your overall time to kill, or I guess decrease your effectiveness for time to kill because of the delayed death because of time payload, but I do think time payload is worth it. And you could also just do opening shot, Slide Shot opening shot. So we're going to put Annual Skate in the A tier because of its base stats are not quite as crazy as some others. And we'll move on to the next hand cannon. Now, this one I actually have a soft spot for. We got the Ancient Gospel. I just don't really want to grind the raid for this, but I wish I could get this roll. It has Eye of the Storm and Rangefinder, which is an insanely good roll. Of course, we know this to be especially good with the new Ostringer. Can get a roll just like this. And this thing overall has decent base stats, but not that S tier that we're looking for. And the rolls are, of course, good with Eye of the Storm Rangefinder. You can also get Eye of the Storm and Kill Clip on it. Rapid Hit and Kill Clip. I mean, the rolls for this thing are kind of crazy. So if you haven't been grinding the Garden, definitely worth grabbing that. If you enjoy grinding raids and such. And then we'll move on to the next one. We've got the Ice Luna. I actually put this one in the S tier. Its base stats are very respectable, and it gets a really good roll with rangefinder and snapshot. Of course, you could just go for the Ostringer and get that exact same roll, but with enhanced perks, which would be significantly better. And of course, the Ostringer is going to be in the S tier, but we'll get to that in a moment. But overall, I do think the IS Luna is an S tier hand cannon, especially with the best roll you can get with it, which would probably be rangefinder snapshot. Of course, the perpetual motion is worth noting in that roll list there. Moving on to the next weapon, we're going to move to a different archetype here, and we've got the Survivor's Epitaph. Now, this is the 180 archetype, which is a little more difficult to use inside PvP. The reason being is that it has a very similar time to kill as it has the same time to kill as like the 120s, but it just requires more bullets. And when you have to shoot more bullets, there's more chance for you to miss, hit body shots, or miss the shots altogether. So these 180s just prove to not be as lethal or as potent inside PvP, and perhaps it's also in part due to the range in which you have to use them. They don't have as much range as the 120s, 140s, and so you end up just getting, in the current sandbox, getting fusion rifle blasted at the exact same equivalent range. But for this hand cannon, it has a really good roll with slide shot and kill clip, and it has a bunch of other good perks. Obviously, getting this is going to be a bit crazy because there's so many perks that it can possibly get, which is obviously a bad thing, I would say. I like when hand cannons have maybe just 6 perks in each slot, because when they have that 12 perk options, it's just like feels like getting the god roll or the best roll is like an impossible task. But Survivor's Epitaph does have such good rolls for PvP. It unfortunately is just a 180, and so I'd have to rank it all the way down there in the B tier ranking. Moving on to the next one, we're going to be talking about the Waking Vigil. Now, the Waking Vigil does have some, it did get an updated perk pool where it got rangefinder added to this. It's got rangefinder and opening shot, which is actually really sick. And if it had better base stats, I would rank it higher, but unfortunately it doesn't, so I'm going to leave it in the A tier. Its perk selection is awesome, though. You've got, rapid hit and kill clip. Waking Vigil is definitely not a hand cannon to laugh at by any means, but it definitely doesn't deserve the S tier rating, in my opinion, due to its base stats just being a little low. We got the next one, we got the Cantata. Cantata, again, falls to the same thing where its base stats aren't the most crazy. It does have such good perks, though. Eye of the Storm, rangefinder. You'll see later on why I rank some of these hand cannons that are extremely popular and well used a little bit lower than most, because there's just a certain select few hand cannons that just stand out so much more. And unfortunately, because of those hand cannons, because they exist, weapons like the Cantata get pushed down a little bit in the ranking. Maybe Cantata would be between A and S tier, though, but I decided to put it in A tier for this video. And we'll move on to the next one. We've got here we've got the Palindrome Adept all the way up there in the S tier. I'm not going to rank the Palindrome and the Palindrome Adept separately, but I'm just going to give it the S tier rating, and you all know why. Its base stats are just unbelievably good overall. You've got right now 50 range, 58 stability base, 50 handling, 42 reload speed, 79 aim assist. I mean, it's just crazy. This thing is just so good. The Palindrome is a beast inside PvP. Definitely worth using. Definitely worth grinding, especially for that adept version. Moving on to the next one, we have the DFA. It's a hand cannon that I have become very familiar with and have really enjoyed using. Still haven't gotten the exact god roll I'm looking for, and the one that I'm going to be ranking in this video is actually going to be the Adept version, which hasn't come out yet, so I'm going to give the Adept version the S tier rating. The non-Adept version probably gets the A tier rating, if I'm being honest, but I'm not going to separate the two, really. That Perpetual Motion timed payload roll is super lethal and super good to use. Perpetual Motion, an S tier perk, timed payload, or an S tier perk. It also kind of depends on what your playstyle is, what you're looking for. If you enjoy making people flinch a ton in PvP, I know I do. I like that. Moving on to the next one. This one is actually kind of a tough one to rank. It is the Nation of Beasts, and you might be thinking to yourself, there's no way Nation of Beasts is an S tier hand cannon. And the issue is that you just don't get energy hand cannons with explosive payload, and this can get opening shot and explosive payload, which is a really sick roll. I don't think many people have that. Many people use this. I honestly think that this hand cannon overall is kind of like a sleeper, and a lot of people undervalue what the Nation of Beasts can do or is capable of. Its base stats are good. Nation of Beasts definitely is a strong hand cannon, and I know some people out there will roast me for that one, but I'm just sticking to it. Nation of Beasts, amazing. Moving on to the next one, we'll be talking about the bottom dollar. Now, obviously, we're talking about a 120 RPM, and the bottom dollar did have its time in the sun before the 120s got the harsh nerf a few seasons ago. The bottom dollar still rolls some crazy rolls, has some great stats overall. You got rangefinder, explosive payload, opening shot, slide shot. You've got all the good perks you're looking for a PvP hand cannon. The only difference is the 120s fire a little bit slower, so you're playing a little more range. But if you like the 120 RPM playstyle, if you play a little more at range, the bottom dollar is definitely A tier in the current sandbox, in the current meta. Definitely a very good option. Moving on to the next one, we'll be talking about the Frontier's Cry, the 180 RPM Iron Banner hand cannon. Now, again, as soon as we start talking about the 180s, we're probably not going to classify any of these as S tier, just because in the current sandbox they just don't like compete with the 140s as much. But it does roll rapid hit and kill clip. It is an Iron Banner weapon, so it's designed for PvP. Like Bungie actually like gave it good PvP perks, but it just doesn't really hang with the 140s or 120s, the S tier ones or the best ones for that matter. So we're putting it down there in the B tier ranking, but it's definitely out of the 180s. That is a pretty good hand cannon to use. Moving on to the next one, we'll talk about the Iklas hand cannon. The Iklas hand cannon is going to get the lowest ranking here with the C tier. You could rock Slideways, Eye of the Storm on this bad boy. Its stats overall are bad, unfortunately. It's just not a hand cannon you're really going to use very often inside PvP. It's more of a PvE hand cannon. Most of you probably could agree with that. You probably have not seen an Iklas hand cannon used in PvP in a long time. And moving on to the next one, we'll talk about something that is definitely of S tier status. We got the Fatebringer Time Lost. This thing is probably like the best hand cannon in the game in a lot of ways. I mean, explosive payload, Eye of the Storm, so good. The stats, base stats are just off the charts, insanely good. Fatebringer is an absolute beast. One of my favorite hand cannons to use. Of course, I'm ranking the Time Lost. I'm not going to rank the regular, but even the regular falls in the S tier category. That's how good it is. Next one, we'll be talking about the Judgment, which you can get from the Prophecy dungeon. We got Slide Shot and Opening Shot. We're going to give the Judgment the A tier rating. Again, it falls in that base stats issue where it doesn't quite have the craziest base stats. Its overall perks are pretty good though. Not the absolute craziest perks we're looking for, but they're pretty good. You got Slide Shot, Opening Shot, probably the God roll to look for. You could even go Slide Shot, Time Payload. And then we'll move on to the next hand cannon, which is going to be the Vulpecula. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Vulpecula. It's a 180 RPM, so again, we're already going down a few rankings. You can get like Killing Wind, Explosive Payload, but honestly, this thing is just not meant for PvP. You don't see people use this in PvP for a reason. And you could use the Explosive Payload on it, and it is a flinch machine because of that higher fire rate, that 180 RPM fire rate. You'll flinch people like crazy. But if you're not really looking for that, and there's a lot of better ways to flinch people and a lot more effective hand cannons at doing so, then you'll use those. Like you use the Fatebringer would be a lot better option. But Killing Wind, Explosive Payload, the God roll of that, but we're still putting it in the C tier ranking because it's a 180. Moving on to the next one, we've got the Nature of the Beast, and that will also fall down into the C tier ranking. And I think we can all agree on this one. This one's got Quick Draw and Rangefinder. Really low handling for this thing. Stats are not that impressive. It's a 180. Doesn't have kill clip on it. Honestly, I didn't even put a D tier ranking on this, but if there was a D tier ranking, Nature of the Beast would probably be there, unfortunately. Nature of the Beast, not the best hand cannon in the current PvP sandbox. Moving on to the next one, we have the Steady Hand. We got the Iron Banner, 120 RPM hand cannon. I'm giving this the A tier rank. And the reason why is because it has a really cool roll that not a lot of people use or talk about, which is the Slide Shot mixed with Iron Grip. Now, Iron Grip greatly improves the weapon's stability at the cost of reload speed for this weapon. But the loss of reload speed isn't a big issue if you have Slide Shot because you just slide and get the ammo back. And that increase to stability, that plus 20 stability, equals less flinch in the current sandbox. So that's actually really sick. Iron Grip, Steady Hand with Slide Shot is actually going to be awesome. A weapon to have in PvP. Next up, we'll talk about the Igneous Hammer, another 120 RPM. Now, this one's actually getting in the S tier ranking, and you can't get this weapon currently, unfortunately. So if you have this roll, awesome. If you don't, well, maybe Bungie will bring it back. It's a 120 RPM. Its base stats are just ridiculously good. It has rapid hit, so it increases its reload and stability with that. And then it also can get Elemental Capacitor. You can use that to increase the stability or the handling, whichever you desire. And overall, this is just like the definitive, like one. This is like I would say almost like the Fatebringer of the 120s, basically, or the Palindrome, like Fatebringer Palindrome. This thing is like a definitive PvP hand cannon. In every way, this is what you want to use when you're playing PvP. If you play at the right range with this weapon, you will be destroying people. It's a very good weapon, and one that probably a lot of people sleep on and shouldn't really. Moving on to the next one, we'll be talking about the True Prophecy. True Prophecy hand cannon has a 120 RPM, and it does get some really sick rolls. I'm ranking the True Prophecy in the A tier ranking because it has that elemental capacitor, so you get that you can increase the handling, you increase the stability with it, and it's got rangefinder, so you can have like insane range with a 120 RPM. So definitely a really good weapon for PvP. Not one you're going to see too often though, because not a lot of people rocking the 120s and really utilizing that range. Usually when you're playing at that range in the current sandbox, people just rocking pulse rifles these days, it seems like. Moving on to the next weapon, we've got the Dire Promise. After the recent buff to this is definitely an S tier hand cannon. So good. I love this thing. It's probably one of my favorite hand cannons to use in PvP. Snapshot, rangefinder, such a good roll. Can't say enough good things about Dire Promise. If you haven't been using this thing in PvP, definitely give it a try. The thing is an actual beast. Moving on to the next hand cannon, we've got the Crisis Inverted. Now, this thing, unfortunately, got a little bit put into a shadow by Cantata, but overall, it is a really good hand cannon. I'm going to put it in the A tier ranking. You got Rapid Hit, Rangefinder, you got Kill Clip as an option as well. Definitely a good all-around hand cannon, and pretty good in Crucible. And we've got the 7 Serif Officer Revolver again next, and that's going to be a 180 RPM. Not really designed for PvP, it would seem, so we're going to put it all the way down there in the C tier ranking in the current sandbox. Firmly Planted Time Payload is probably the role that you'd use if you were going to use this thing, but overall, probably not really using this thing in PvP too much. Next, we'll talk about the Ostringer. The Ostringer gets the S tier ranking. S tier, S plus tier. I mean, you've got the enhanced rangefinder, the enhanced Eye of the Storm. Its base stats are just absolutely off the charts. Can't say enough good things about the Ostringer. You've got, it's honestly like the Ostringer, the Fatebringer, and the Palindrome are like in a category of their own in terms of they have the crazy base stats and they have the good perks. Like, it's like unfair to the other hand cannons in a lot of ways. So it's very hard ranking those any other hand cannons in S tier besides those three. Moving on to the next one, we have the Posterity, which gets the exact opposite treatment. We're putting the Posterity all the way down there in the C tier ranking. The reason why is because it's the 180 RPM, and it really just doesn't have very good perks for it. We got Rapid Hit and Opening Shot. Not the best perks overall for a hand cannon, so we're going to skip that one and put it all the way down in C tier. Move on to the next one. We got the Finite Impactor. All right, so the Finite is a 140 that gets the lowest ranking of any 140. Bad base stats. I don't know what they were doing with this thing. You can rock Slideways and Elemental Capacitor, but there's just so many other better options for a 140. And so Finite gets literally the lowest ranking for the 140s, all the way down there in the B tier. And we'll move on to the next one, which is the Loud Lullaby 120 RPM hand cannon. All right, we've got Slide Shot and Kill Clip on this bad boy. Its overall stats, not the craziest. There's certainly a bunch of other 120s that are just a lot better than this. It is a cool 120 to get Kill Clip on if that's what you're looking for. So definitely don't laugh at the Loud Lullaby if you're looking for a 120 with a Kill Clip, because it might be your only option in the current sandbox. Criminal's Dagger is the next one we talk about, which does have Kill Clip and is a 120. But as far as we know right now, this isn't coming back anytime soon. It has such crazy perks on it. It has such good just stats and everything. You've got Rangefinder, Snapshot, Explosive Payload, Opening Shot, Time Payload, Moving Target. It's got all the good perks. I'm very jealous of people out there that have a Criminal's Dagger and have a good roll of it, because I don't have any rolls of this thing. For some reason, I dismantled mine. I don't know why, or I just never got a really good roll. So I'm very sad about it. If you have one of those, let me know in the comments below what roll of your Criminal's Dagger you have. And you're a very, very lucky person to have a good roll of that thing, because that's like probably one of the most sought after hand cannons right now, I'd say. Moving on next, we'll talk about the exotic hand cannons now that we've classified all of the legendaries. The Malfeasance, again, we got a 180 RPM. Doesn't really do anything magical for PvP. Obviously, the 5 body shots exploding and killing people, it seems like a cool perk to it, but if you have to shoot 5 body shots, you're going to get killed by the majority of other hand cannons out there. That's just increases your time to kill to a level that's just going to be really painful to win those gunfights. You're not going to run around with this thing and try and hit those 5 body shots. So we're going to put that all the way down in the C tier ranking. Unfortunately, Malfeasance, not the best exotic hand cannon for PvP. Next up, we'll talk about the Ace of Spades. This thing's unfair. This thing is, especially with everyone not jumping in the air now, this thing is literally unfair to rank almost. Like, if there should almost be an S plus tier ranking and we would definitely have to put Ace in there for the radar, for the Memento Mori, the damage boost. It's just such a good weapon. This is an absolute workhorse, something you should be using, especially with the recent sandbox changes. I can easily see this being the #1 weapon in Trials for multiple weeks this season, once people start to realize more and more that you don't want to jump in the air and that staying grounded with a 140 is the way. People are going to realize Ace is the hand cannon to use, but it'll take people a little bit of time to get to that conclusion, I think. Moving on to the next exotic, we'll talk about the Last Word. They just recently gave a small buff to this to mouse and keyboard. It's definitely better, but I still think it's a lot stronger on controller, a lot more consistent. S tier ranking, of course. I mean, its optimal time to kill is just off the charts. It's not that hard to hit your shots with this thing. The range is like ridiculous. The Last Word is like a broken archetype exotic. It doesn't even make sense how it's in the game in a lot of ways, but the Last Word definitely gets the S tier ranking if you haven't been using that thing. Make sure to slap that bad boy on in the current sandbox. Then we'll talk about the Sturm. Now I'm giving Sturm the A tier ranking. Hear me out. 1, if you actually get the Catalyst on it, it's pretty good. And 2, if you do rock Sturm and Drang, which isn't as bad in the current sandbox because of all the special ammo nerfs and the shotgun nerfs, if you do rock Sturm and Drang, it's actually a really good combination, really good synergy between the two, and Sturm gets really, really strong at that point in time, and I would definitely give it the A tier ranking if you're rocking Sturm and Drang. If you aren't rocking Drang, then maybe I would push it a little closer towards B, but even still, it's not a bad hand cannon overall. Its overall stats and with Catalyst is actually really good and actually fun to use, so if you haven't been using the Sturm or giving it a try, definitely take that for a spin in PvP in the current sandbox. Next up, we've got the Sunshot. Now, the Sunshot is an S tier exotic hand cannon. Let me fully explain why. It's a 150, the only 150 RPM in the game, so it's going to have the fastest, most lethal time to kill. You got to hit those 3 headshots, but it just has really low aim assist. If you can actually hit your shots with this, like it has an asterisk with the Sunshot being S tier. If you can hit your shots, this thing is probably the nastiest hand cannon in the game. In a lot of ways with the range, the payload on it, everything. But it does require some really good and really precise aim to actually use the Sunshot. So keep that in mind. If you got that cracked aim, use the Sunshot. If not, then it may not be the exotic for you. Next up, as far as exotics go, the Crimson is definitely an S tier exotic, one that you see commonly make it in the top 10 for the Trials meta report. This thing is super lethal. It has insanely high stability. You're not flinching with this thing. In the current sandbox, in the current PvP meta, this thing is definitely up there. And more, I think controller users and mouse and keyboard users are going to start using this thing as they start to realize that this thing has crazy good stability and is just overall a really sick exotic hand cannon to use. Next up, we've got the exotic Lumina, which is actually a lot stronger than a lot of people realize. People kind of sleep on it a little bit, but with the recent changes, Lumina is a great option. You have the 140 RPM, time to kill, and then after you get that kill, you can buff people with kill clip that just applies to all their different weapons that they have on. I mean, that's a really sick added benefit to using this exotic. So definitely Lumina is an A tier exotic and definitely worth using in the current sandbox. Next up, we've got the Ariana's Vow, which has just recently gone through a bunch of changes and is no longer like one-tapping people and stuff. So unfortunately, the Ariana's Vow gets the B tier treatment. Still going to be really strong because it's a special ammo weapon, so it's kind of hard to rank a special ammo weapon paired with a bunch of primary ammo weapons because special ammo weapons just have like increased lethality at the cost of the ammo economy. But Ariana's Vow still good, obviously, for the amount of damage it does, but not what it used to be. It used to be S tier because you could one tap with certain builds and certain, swapping and stuff like that. But right now in the current sandbox, I'm giving the Ariana's a B tier ranking. Moving on to the next exotic, we have the Hawkmoon. This is definitely going in the S tier. Hawkmoon, super good. Get the best perk on it. Obviously, go to Xur. You can get those random rolls. Get that rangefinder roll. Whatever it is you like. Maybe you rock Eye of the Storm. I'm saying rangefinder. Rangefinder on the Hawkmoon, so good. And the perk that procs with this thing makes it just a joy to use and really, really lethal and really good. Especially now that people aren't jumping as much. Hawkmoon is definitely up there in S tier. Worth using inside PvP. The very last exotic we're going to be ranking is the Thorn. The Thorn, unfortunately, just doesn't have as much range as it needs to get the S tier ranking. It's such a good exotic hand cannon. I have to give it the A tier ranking, but with a little asterisk that it's still really good. Maybe it could be between A and S tier ranking, but due to that low range, I'm going to give it the A tier ranking overall. But that's a complete wrap on my entire hand cannon ranking tier list. Let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments below. If you think I unfairly ranked something higher or lower than it should be, I'll happily hear your comments down below. And again, make sure to subscribe with notifications on. If you did enjoy, smash the like button. I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Later.